Hey, how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. Please make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. So, it is April 6th, the year of our Lord 2023, and it looks like Ukraine is getting ready to launch their long-rumored offensive. And it looks like Russia is preparing and anticipating this offensive. As a matter of fact, as we're going to read here, they've increased, their threats and their warnings, especially aimed at NATO and the United States, in supporting and in taking part in this offensive, which they are doing. So we'll have to see how Russia responds if this offensive actually takes place. Now, we're going to be reading from Newsweek, and I can't believe I'm actually using Newsweek. It's one of the news websites that I like, that I dislike using the most, or that I dislike using because they're essentially like a Washington mouthpiece, right? And super pro-Ukrainian, very biased. They're always bashing on Russia, and they're always exaggerating the situation in Ukraine in favor of Ukraine. But they actually did a decent analysis here, a decent summary of the current situation. So we're going to be taking a read from Newsweek. And before we do, let me just give you my opinion. So I think Ukraine has to launch an offensive. This is the year they have to actually show some initiative, because the support for Ukraine is waning, right? It's becoming less and less as months go on. The United States right now is distracted with all the political drama going over there between the Republicans and the Democrats. Of course, we got the 2024 election coming, and Russia, however the Western news conglomerate likes to paint the situation, is continuing to advance slowly. They are making progress in Bakhmut, and they are inflicting a lot of casualties on Ukraine. And up until now, that's the reason we're going to talk about this rumored offensive. Ukraine has not launched an offensive, right? They haven't really launched a major offensive to regain these major towns that Russia has taken. And so this is supposed to be that, right? This is supposed to be the major offensive that Ukraine is going to launch in order to push the Russians out of its territory, which is pretty much nearly impossible. If for some reason they were to actually be successful and even get close to expelling Russia out of all of that territory, Russia would probably resort to small tactical nuclear weapons. Because you have to remember, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, that's now legal territory of Russia. It's part of Russia according to the Kremlin, right? According to the Russian government. So this would be like a major attack on Russia itself, since these places are now legally part of Russia. Yes, they're not recognized by the West and all of their allies, but they don't have to recognize it. Russia is a superpower in the world. So what do I expect here? I think that Zelensky has to launch an offensive. He has to show some initiative, and I don't think it's going to be successful. They're not going to win the war with this offensive, okay? They're not going to win the war, period, unless the U.S. and NATO get directly involved, which they're pretty much saying they're not, and they would not. And even if they did, then we're talking about a World War III scenario, nuclear war. So I think Ukraine will launch this offensive. I think they might regain a little bit of land, right? And then I think the Western media is going to propagate that as much as they can and try to make this seem like Russia has failed. But then I think that Ukraine is going to suffer terrible losses after the offensive, and I think that is going to spell the end for Zelensky. After that, I expect things to just take a turn for the worse for Zelensky. So I think that we will see this offensive. Now is the time for Ukraine. They are receiving that promised aid, those German tanks, those American tanks, right? The missiles. And so I think they will be effective at first. I think Russia might even decide to draw back strategically. But then we're going to see the major Russian counteroffensive. And this is if Ukraine is actually able to muster up a decent offensive operation, because a lot of their elite forces have been fighting and dying in Bakhmut. So there's a very good possibility that this offensive isn't even going to come close to what the West and all the pro-Ukrainian analysts are expecting. And I think that could even be more likely than what I stated before. But anyways, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Let's go ahead and take a quick read at this article here by Newsweek. So it says, Russia is trying to use nuclear threats to discourage Kyiv's Western backers from providing military aid ahead of an expected counteroffensive, according to a new assessment. Speaking on Tuesday, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu issued reinvigorated nuclear blackmail rhetoric, according to the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War, or as I like to call them, the Propaganda Institute for the Study of War think tank. Shoigu defended Russia's decision to transfer nuclear weapons to Belarus, saying NATO had increased combat training and reconnaissance at Russia's borders. He said Western aid to Ukraine risks a significant expansion of the conflict, according to a Kremlin readout. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on March 25th that Russia would station nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus, one of Moscow's staunchest allies. It was the first time the Kremlin had moved to place nuclear weapons outside the country since the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, the only other country that has nuclear weapons outside of the country is, you guessed it, the United States. The Russian ambassador to Belarus, Boris Gryzlov, later said the weapons would be moved up closer to the western border of Belarus, in closer proximity to many NATO nations. So let's actually go ahead and take a quick look at the map here for those of you that might be new and don't necessarily know the location of Belarus. So we can see Ukraine right here in the middle of the screen. We can see the front lines where the major conflict is taking place. All of this over here is land that is now legally part of Russia, according to Russia. And if we go to the north of Belarus, rather to the north of Ukraine, we can see Belarus. So Russia is going to deploy nuclear weapons here, and Belarus is going to have these nuclear weapons, and as we just read, they are planning on deploying them to the west of Belarus, and I'm sure to the south, closer to Kyiv. And so this is going to pose a direct threat to NATO nations like Poland, Germany, and all these other nations over here. As I just covered, Finland just became the 31st member of NATO, so now NATO has this whole border to work with. And again, this is a threat to Moscow because the capital of Moscow is right here. So things are definitely escalating rapidly. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see how things develop here within the next couple of weeks and months. But I think something big is going to happen this year, guys. And, I'm going to go ahead and predict that by the end of this year, at the latest, Zelensky will be defeated. He will be ousted from power, especially if he goes ahead and launches this offensive and then it fails epically, which I believe it will. Just based on the fact that most honest analysts know that there's no way Ukraine can defeat Russia, right? The only reason they've actually been going this long is because of all the aid they've been receiving. And that aid is not enough. They need stronger weapons. So, So Shoigu said there, Putin will meet with Belarus leader Alexander Lukashenko on Wednesday and Thursday, the Kremlin confirmed. Late last month, Putin said the transfer of nuclear weapons would not violate non-proliferation agreements, saying there was nothing unusual about the move. In the wake of the announcement, the U.S. said it had not seen any reason to adjust our own strategic nuclear posture or any indications Russia is preparing to use nuclear weapons. Shoigu's statements come ahead of Ukraine's long-anticipated spring offensive. Russian forces are continuing to prepare for a rumored pending Ukrainian push in the south of the country, the Institute for the Study of War said. In late March, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev told Russian media that Moscow's military commanders were calculating for a move by Kyiv, and the Kremlin's general staff is preparing its own solutions. Ukrainian officials had stressed the importance of weapons deliveries from the West to be able to carry out such a counteroffensive. So there you have it, guys. Ukraine doesn't have enough to launch a series of offensive. They're actually counting on more weapon deliveries from NATO and the United States. And the arrival of equipment in Ukraine likely sets conditions for a Ukrainian counteroffensive, the Institute for the Study of War wrote in late March. So pretty much they're saying that this counteroffensive and how successful it is going to depend on the support that Ukraine receives here within the next couple of weeks and months. The U.S. Department of Defense announced a new $2.6 billion security aid package for Ukraine on Tuesday, including additional ammunition for Kyiv's high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, while Finland formally joined NATO, as I stated, ending its policy of military non-alignment in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A senior U.S. defense official said on Tuesday that the newly unveiled round of aid was focused on supporting the Ukrainians to change the dynamic of the ground. So it sounds like this Zelensky probably gave Washington a call and said, hey, look, we're planning an offensive. What can you guys do for us? Washington said, hey, we'll send you another check. Never mind the inflation and the economy collapsing here. You just go ahead and cash this check for $2.6 billion. So it looks like that was aimed at this rumored offensive that is supposedly coming here by the Ukrainian army. We want to help Ukraine advance and hold its positions in what we expect will be a Ukrainian counteroffensive, the official added in a Pentagon briefing. So there you have it, guys. The Pentagon admitted that those $2.6 billion are aimed as support for this Ukrainian counteroffensive. So, Russia has control of the center of Bakhmut, the Wagner forces. Looks like they're getting closer every day to capturing the whole of Bakhmut. Things are not going in the way of Zelensky. Say what you want to say, propagate as much, Western propaganda as you want to. The facts on the battlefield speak for themselves, right? Even these Western analysts, admit that Russia is exactly where we're seeing on these maps. So on the ground, looking at the maps, Russia is winning. Everything else is just propaganda. It's unverified information, and Ukraine is going to launch this, and I think everybody knows and expects this offensive to fail. Okay, Russia has a long history of major offensives waged against the nation, such as when Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the greatest military strategists of all time, launched an offensive into Russia. They failed. Hitler, for as evil as he was and racist and whatnot, launched one of the strongest forces in human history. I think the strongest invasion ever seen by a highly capable and organized Nazi army. And they reached, I believe, Berlin, but they were defeated. That was their major offensive. And this offensive is not even close to what those were. And Russia is a lot more stronger than they were during World War II and during the Napoleon offensive. They have nuclear weapons, right? they can take out Ukraine, within seconds if they just launch 1 or 2 tactical nuclear weapons. And in my opinion, the West would not respond. But it looks like Vladimir Putin has, he's been acting with a lot of restraint. A lot of Russians and Russian politicians have been asking for more aggression. A lot of them have even called for nuclear strikes. But I think that Russia is behaving a lot more rational than the West is. And I think that if this counteroffensive comes, it's going to be the end for Ukraine. They just can't afford a failed counteroffensive. But I think out of desperation, Zelensky is going to give the order in order to try and please the Western nations, the U.S. and NATO, because of all the support they have been sending without any actual good results on the ground. So I think this offensive is inevitable. And the fact that they're actually, as we just read here, are planning on launching it on the south just kind of tells you that, they're not really confident on the offensive, because if they were, then they would launch it on in the east, right, where the main war is taking place, where the mighty force of Russia is deployed. They're trying to work around that. So it looks like they're looking for an easy victory, and they could achieve that in the south for sure. But it's not going to have any actual, major consequences or anything like that. Where they want to attack is, the front lines in the east. But I don't think they actually have the capability, and they're just not receiving enough support from the Western nations. So, we'll definitely have to keep an eye out on this, guys. I think we're going to see a major development here within the next couple of months. And again, by the end of the year, I think things are going to look very different in Ukraine, especially with the Ukrainian government. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. I don't care if you're pro-Ukrainian, if you're pro-NATO. Let me know. I'm not going to criticize you. I let everybody speak their mind on here. And just remember, guys, the truth is stranger than fiction. That's going to be it for this video. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.